Says it's a nitro beer. Shake, can, invert into glass. What could go wrong? Cheers everyone, welcome back. Grandma's Handbag. Top 100 time, numbers 40 to 31. The helper here. Gives a good moustache. Sorry, you shouldn't have to see that. There we go. A Midnight Barley Cowboy. It is a nitro hopped porter. So, just in case you're wondering if I screwed that head up, not true, didn't happen. I'll give it a top up. Really nice and creamy, obviously like a Guinness. That's what the nitro does anyway. 6% alcohol, so nice and strong. The hops deliver that kick that you want, and yeah, hoppy porter, pretty good stuff. All right, let's jump straight into it, shall we? Number 40. Here we go. Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. This is one of those real big bang albums for me. I remember being in high school and carrying this album and Syd Barrett solo albums around on Walkman and just being completely immersed in it. This version, by the way, is a 97 mono version. Brought out for the, I forget the 100th anniversary of EMI. So just thought I'd show a slightly different one for us there. But anyway, this is Floyd, but it's that classic Barrett-led left of center stuff, you know. To use some 60s terminology, this one is definitely guided by the left side of the Floyd brain. You know, Syd, his guitar and his songwriting. Rick Wright's keyboards are elemental in there as well. But again, it's also that early freedom of improvisation of the band that really what set them on the path that they'd sort of meticulously honed by the time it came to Echoes and especially Dark Side onwards, you know, when the right side brain of the band, the architectural side, started to dominate. What I love about this album, there's still this thrilling off-the-cuff element, even to the studio performance that speaks of their improv, their underground, their UFO sort of roots in there. And that's what keeps this album perpetually fresh to me. It's the same with Syd's scratching, echoing guitar. You can almost hear his mind free associating as he plays. You know, Syd Barrett as a guitar innovator, you can believe the hype based on this album for sure. You know, then you've got the studio songs and the magic of Barrett's ones like Flaming, Scarecrow, Matilda Mother, Bike, you know. Those songs of whimsy that still hold their magic, their incandescence there. You know, once I would have included this album just because it was Floyd, but now I sort of include this because I see it in a wider context of British psych of the 60s, and this is an absolute high point of that going on. Piper at the Gates of Dawn, number 40. Number 39, Royal Headache, with their self-titled album from 2011. I first saw these guys supporting King Khan and the Shrines in January 2010, and it was love at first chord. Glorious, overdriven Rickenbacker that's sort of somewhere between that Beatles jangle and the jet raw propulsion of Husker do. Drums in there that stumble goofily along after everything, and meanwhile the singer Shogun just throws his voice at these notes and things, and he hits them, and I don't know how he does it. Vocals to me really remind sort of that early 60s soul edge of John Lennon, and there's even a local singer screamer, Jimmy Barnes in Australia from ex of Cold Chisel, kind of reminds me a lot of that. So it's garage punk, but these real soulful vocals in there. And those vocals just wrap up everything I love about this album. You know, these songs, they're not complicated or pretty. Garage rockers about loving and losing. They hit their changes and they just keep on rushing at you, you know. 12 songs, soul punk blasts at 2 minutes a pop. And the songs often end start and end in feedback, you know, just to let the singer catch his breath. They're going that quick. And that's also why they've got 2 instrumentals on here. So it's completely this live set album. The songs on here resonate with all the bad feelings inside me. Every time I listen, they just make me want to sing and shout, kick and thrash about, and always make me feel better coming out of listening to this album than I was going in. And what more could you ask for with a great album, you know? If you don't know this or have this album, please change that. I really believe this is world class. I'm going to leave you with a needle drop, which is really hard to work out what I'm going to do, which song, because they're all that good. Alright, this one as well, number 38, Seki Malinga and Kaleidoscope, self-titled, 1979. This makes it in like the other one, just for the sheer joy of listening. And there's not too many albums that can stake that claim for me. This is music that makes me happy, and it's infused on every groove of this album too. And it's also about 50 of the best cents I've ever spent on a blind buy. I'm showing it on CD because this album is rare. It's impossibly rare, and it's got an amazing backstory as well. Basically, this was recorded by Lee Scratch Perry. You can see his name there in 1977 with the titular musicians I mentioned there that came from the Congo. Apparently they were rescued by Scratch Perry on the streets of Kingston after they were abandoned by their record label. So he got them in, recorded them, and look, they contribute vocals, horns, percussion, and I can tell you now the vocals and horns are bottled sunshine to me. I just can't state how lyrical these are, you know. And meanwhile in the background, that trademark Black Ark production murk, you know, the squelch, it gives this beautiful, wonderful warmth to the rhythms on the album here. There's an embarrassment of melodic richness on here, and it effortlessly melds African and Jamaican rhythms in sounds into some kind of deep rhythmic soul. Beautiful stuff. Make no mistake too, this is prime Lee Scratch Perry Black Ark production territory, to the point where I think Perry used this as a template to make his Heart of the Congos and the Congos album. Great as that album is, this is the one that you need to be checking out. Trumps it. It's phenomenal. Is that overstating it? Anyway, if there's one album that's crying out for a vinyl release, this is it. Do not miss this album. I'll leave you with a needle drop or a sample of this one as well. Number 36, Husker Zen Arcade from 1984. This music to me feels really old. Sorry, not old. It just feels far away, like an arcade, like the 1980s itself. You know, I'm sure the dry monochrome production on this album sort of lends to that feeling, and I really like that as well. The fact that it was recorded, mixed inside 4 days, just gives me a sense of time and place. It's this sort of raw living snapshot rather than any sort of studio concoction of an album. When I found this album in my mid-20s, I could totally buy into the punk quadrophenia narrative arc of the album as well. You know, just all that anger and rage repressed in there. Overdriven Rickenbacker sounds, just the guitar goes from a propulsive beast to a raw scream and into a jazz scree courtesy of Bob Mould. So that cry and roar of his pain in there, mixed in with the pop sweetness of Grant Hart, it's just irresistible to me. Like, I'm not overstating the case that Mould and Hart are an alternative rock Lennon-McCartney. They're that important, you know. There's a pop tautness on this album where the band has in their writing that they almost seem to fight with. They're at war with a hardcore attack of their performance. And that's what makes this album so thrilling to me as well. There's just, there's no fat on here. And I absolutely include every minute of Reoccurring Dreams, the closer in that. Love this album. Number 36. Can with Tago Mago. I don't know why I haven't got this on vinyl. I'm going to need to fix that soon. One of the first albums that blew my mind on the first listen. The kind of album I needed to hear right when I did. You know, when I needed to go further out than psych and to go beyond those blues-based music forms. You know, it blows my mind. I still can't believe there's only one person drumming on Hallelujah. In fact, I can't believe Jackie Liebezat is a human and not a drum machine. And just on that as well, Hallelujah, all-time side-along classic song. And this is an all-time classic double album to boot. Even though a track like Om is hard, it's a hard one to listen to repetitively anyway. Every other band member on this album is essential too. Their playing here is utterly intuitive. It's almost free of any ego whatsoever. It's organic. It's like they're almost tapping into this rhythm of the cosmos, and like they're excising these songs from one eternal jam that continues on regardless through time and space. Look, I've thrown around a ton of flowery words on this one already, and I probably still haven't scratched the surface. Look, you all know how good this one is. It's still my go-to mind melter. There's some kind of voodoo magic on this thing that seems beyond human to me at times. And, you know, as our lived experiences pile up, the world sort of slowly loses its mystery. But this one here refuses to give up its secrets no matter how much I try to crack it. The mystery is firmly intact with this one, and I hope that never changes. I don't think it will. Number 35, Talking Heads with Remain in Light from 1980. It's really funny how certain songs sort of seep into your consciousness. My first real conscious memory of Talking Heads, believe it or not, was hearing Mercury Rev play Once in a Lifetime live in 1999, you know, portently singing. And you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may ask yourself, my God, how did I get here? And just sort of that image at that time from that band set me off on a path of Talking Heads that led to this album. You know, the high point for me of Talking Heads. This album's got this constant tension here for me of sounding in the groove and of a piece, you know, but also constantly itching, scratching, and very uncomfortable in its own skin. And maybe that's what it is at the heart of this album for me. Underneath the rhythmic, organic skin bubbles this fractured discontentment that lay right at the heart, you know, not of this album, but of life around us these days as well. You know, and I definitely get that in David Byrne's vocal arrangements and his lyrics as well. But band-wise, I hear a lot of James Brown on this thing, you know, from the chattering Chank Nolan guitars. You hear it on Born Under Punches or Houses in Motion. You know, the lock bass and drums throughout. It's real tight skeletal funk that's so artfully deconstructed and robotically reassembled that it's weird that it feels organic in a way. That construction, though, is part of the magic here, with my favourite boffin, Brian Eno, right at the wheel, and pushing the band conceptually while sculpting band parts into that sleek new machine you hear on here. It was the beginning of the end for the band, almost as though birthing this prodigy is what killed it. I'd have to say it's worth it. Once in a Lifetime still has that utter magic for me, that ageless twinkling synth on there, and despite my dry dissection of the magic on this album, somehow Remaining Light still manages to link the head, the heart and the feet for me, something I can listen to again and again and again and still be amazed, the same as it ever was. Number 34, Vashti Bunyan with Just Another Diamond Day from 1970. I came to Vashti through Nick Drake. This is a Joe Boyd and John Wood production, just like Nick's albums, and it's likewise a thing of real beauty and fragility. This acoustic album that reconnects nursery rhymes with their folk roots, unlike any other I've kind of found before. It really makes those links obvious. The idyllic backstory on here, if you don't know, Vashti and her partner chasing a hippie commune the length of England and Scotland in a gypsy horse and cart for 18 months, only to arrive where it was, found out it never happened, and to come back laden with songs and record this album. There's no artifice in these songs or performances on here, you know, because I think if there was, it would quickly move from twee to something quite trite, really. Likewise, even though there's various Fairport conventions, string banders on here, the pudding here is never ever over-egged. 3 tracks arranged by Robert Kirby from also Nick Drake albums, and just beautifully, intuitively arranged as well. I've said before, music has sort of given me this emotional palette to draw from. It's taught me how to feel, and this album speaks to sensitivity and gentility, and I feel like they're sort of things that are fairly rare in music these days. No doubt they're out there, but this is a beautiful example of it. It's not a traditional top 100 album, but I mean, at least it's a lost classic, and even more than that, a very influential record on modern folk and freak folk as well. It's an absolute treasure to me. Vashti Bunyan, number 34. Number 33, the Kinks from 1968 with the Village Green and Preservation Society. This album, to me, more than Sgt. Pepper's, makes good on the promise of it was 20 years ago today, you know. It feels like a rickety ride through post-war, pre-rock and roll, post-World War II, but pre-rock and roll era music and people. And it almost feels like a true folk music itself in a way. But rather than being confected as that Summer of Love Pepper album was, this thing is right at the heart, is instead a deep affection for those folk that are being left behind in the 60s, for whom the 60s basically never happened. And more than that, there's this ache in there, I find, for that simpler time. You know, a sense of loss right in the moment where things are changing. From a man, too, very much out of time. It's Ray Davies. It's his channeling his outsider spirit here that appeal to memories and feelings, and he puts it into a contained an escapist world, you know. You've got characters like Johnny Thunders, Wicked Annabella, Phenomenal Cats, Animal Farm, and all of your friends are there as well. Just a lovely album. The production on here, I find, has got this real slight unfocused blur to it. Kind of like all the best childhood photos do as well. They speak more of the moment than of posterity. And as a snapshot of a rapidly changing world in '68, though, I find it laser sharp. I can see why some folks might choose another Kinks album, or even not a Kinks album, in a top 100. I mean, they're a pretty good singles band before this. But for me, this one delivers on all the promises of those earlier singles, and then points away to where they'd go with Arthur and on into the 70s. Absolutely timeless stuff, the Kinks. This is a Swedish cover. Just thought I'd show you for something different out of the Kinks box set I picked up earlier. Number 32. Now, I can't think of many bands that put out a greatest hits before their debut album, but The Clean aren't like many other bands to me. This is Vehicle from 1990, number 32. They were approached by Rough Trade Records during a one-off European tour to make an album. They went into a studio and over 4 days put all new songs down, and then finally, 12 years after they formed, 8 after they disbanded, all these side projects, anthologies, and years of trying to force things out-tumbled this album, this influential album of naive pop brilliance. It's got the thrust of punk there, with 60s psych and surf melodies. It's got the kind of sound that would go on to influence 90s and noughties bands like Pavement, Guided by Voices, Yola Tango, more on there. David Kilgore's guitar here, ricochets and rings, shooting off Sterling Morrison sparks that light up their 60s influences. Hamish Kilgore's motoric drumming is equal parts Mo Tucker and Klaus Dinger, while Robert Scott, also of the Bats, brings a warmth with his bass and a pop touch to anchor things here. Songs like Drawing to a Hole, Big Soft Punch, Diamond Shine, Someone, quite a lot of songs on here, all simple love songs at heart, quite obtuse but capturing the awkward side of newfound love. All gangly guitars and heartbeat drums and sunshine organs going on there. Other songs nod gently to the band's early psychedelic whimsy, and there's 3 acoustic tracks on here, scattered about to give a bit of breathing space, more or less, because you get 13 songs, less than 30 minutes, barely a note wasted on this thing, and Vehicle to me absolutely delivered on the effervescent promise of their debut single Tally Ho, and it also laid to rest albatrosses of being an iconic Flying Nun band without an album to that point. It also freed them to create just as they wanted after that. An absolute joy of an album. I'm going to leave you with a track. I think it might be Diamond Shine.
Your
Number 31, Neil Young, After the Gold Rush from 1970. I think I was about 19 years old, maybe the first time I heard Neil Young, really heard him. And when that shaky, unadorned voice came out to meet me, I felt some sort of a homecoming on there. This album really bridges the optimism of youth with the bruises that come from starting to find your own way. And this album, when I heard that, was right where I needed to be. There's that fragility and uncertainty, say, that you hear in the first two tracks, and then somehow coupled with that nascent, unshakable belief that Neil's able to summon throughout his career on songs like Southern Man. Utterly intoxicating mix for all that. And then you throw in the deceptively brilliant songwriting, and you get an album with no great theme to it overall anyway, but just one killer tune after another rolling over you. Guitar, piano, band, doesn't matter. It all sounds so easy on here. In fact, my only gripe on here is that every Neil Young song on here shows up that cover of Don Gibson's Oh Lonesome Me as a weaker song on here. Songs like Birds, After the Gold Rush here just feel like they're almost not of this earth. Wonderful stuff. The first Neil Young album I heard, and it's an album to me that feels forever young on so many levels, you know. I put it on, half my short years already seem to melt away. You all know this one. It hurts me to put it at number 31, but, I mean, it deserves a spot in any hot top 100. Neil Young, After the Gold Rush. Cheers, everyone. Thank you so much for being patient, for checking in, for coming along with me on the journey here. If you've got any favourites in here, any albums you think are worthy of a higher or lower spot, let me know. I'm always happy to hear any surprises or things like that that'd make your top 100 of these ones. Love to hear from you. Thank you all for your kind words and your support. Take care, and I'll talk to you all pretty soon.